The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by BASF.
Hey, Kara Oosterhuis here with RealAgriculture.com. I am back here today with another Pulse School episode, and I have here with me Lara de Moissac, who is with SWAT Maps. Lara, how is it going today?
It's really good, Kara.
Okay, so we're standing in a wheat field here today to discuss some of the considerations you're going to have when it comes to fall soil sampling ahead of a pulse crop.
Correct. So one of the things that we want to consider, we could probably start from the very beginning with why is it important to soil test before a pulse crop? With the kind of drought cycle that we've had these past couple of years, you could expect a lot of residual nitrate. That residual nitrate, if there's too much of it, some people describe the pulse crop as becoming lazy. What's actually happening is, it's laziness when there is excess nitrate available to that crop. However, what's happening is the pulse crop itself makes an exchange. It exchanges carbohydrates to that bacteroid in the nodule after it's effectively nodulated and created that nodule. It's exchanging carbohydrates for usable forms of nitrogen. If there is too much nitrate available in the soil, it actually won't send carbohydrates, and it actually won't send out that chemical signal to the rhizobia to even initiate nodulation. So that's the kind of physiological mechanism happening there, but there's also the fact that you want to use that residual nitrogen for a crop that actually needs it. So we want to maximize that end sparing effect that a pulse crop can have.
So you mentioned a lazy pulse crop. Do you want to talk about what that visually could look like?
Ooh. Well, you might not see necessarily anything happening above ground, but if you were to do a nodulation assessment 2024 or the next year after when you're growing the pulse crop, you could potentially still see nodules that have formed, but you'd break them open and they'd be cream or brown or green. They wouldn't be effectively creating nitrogen.
So why now? Talk a bit about why fall soil sampling is really important here.
So after such a dry year, and maybe not necessarily in this area, we're kind of tucked up against the foothills, but more we're still in southern Alberta. But if you thought about the brown soil zone where they really have not had any moisture, they barely had any snowpack last winter, and they haven't had, I think they're surviving on less than 3 inches of precipitation overall. So the nitrogen levels could be really, really high. And so far, we're mid-September. Ideally, yes, you would wait until soil temperatures are below 10 degrees or they're starting to cool off. However, if you're an agronomist with a lot of acres to cover, farmers, if you have agronomists that are soil sampling for you and they have a lot of acres to cover, the best time to get a soil sample to figure out those residual nitrate levels is now. Just go out to the field and get a soil sample when you can. The other thing to consider is how you take that soil sample. How deep do you need to go? And do you need to take a composite sample? Or are you going to do an approach more like what we would take with SWAT maps? And you would sample by zone, but those zones are delineated based on nutrient response potential and topography, or nutrient response potential and maybe textural differences that would determine not the yield response per se, but the nutrient response potential of that crop in different zones. When we talk about topography and residuals, we're talking mainly about water movement down a soil profile and down a topographical position. We're talking about organic matter percentages in your typical dry hilltops, your mid slopes, and your depression positions. Those are all going to change. Nutrient movement as well. So in a hilltop position, or what we would call a zone 1 or 2, you may have very high residual nitrate. In a depression position, it may be even higher depending on nutrient movement, or if you're in the dry brown, then you maybe not you wouldn't have had any nutrient movement at all. But I would get those sampled separately. You also want to make sure you're going deep enough in case there was any nitrogen movement, since it is a mobile nutrient. At least down to 16 inches. I know a lot of people would recommend down to 24 with the amount of, or the lack of precipitation we've had. I think 16 inches this year would suffice. So you do want to make sure you're getting that complete picture, because crops will root down further than 6 inches.